just 10 women in British history have been called Princess of Wales. Some became legends, some lived through heartbreak, betrayal, and even tragedy. Today, I'll tell you the real stories of the women behind the title. The title word Princess of Wales has been used since the 14th century. The first woman known to hold it was Eleanor de Montfort, wife of Llywelyn ap Gruffudd. Sadly, Eleanor died in childbirth, and the title passed to their daughter, Gwenllian of Wales. After Wales was conquered by Edward I, the title Princess of Wales was only given to the wife of the heir to the British throne. The first member of the British royal family to officially use the title Princess of Wales was Joan of Kent. She was a Plantagenet and went down in history as the Fair Maid of Kent. Chroniclers called her the most beautiful woman in the kingdom and the most loving. Joan married Edward of Woodstock, known as the Black Prince, eldest son of King Edward III. It was her third marriage, but Edward died before becoming king, and their son, Richard of Bordeaux, would one day become King Richard II. Joan, in turn, became the Dowager Princess of Wales. And Neville was not only Queen of England, but also Princess of Wales, though only for 5 months and only by her first marriage. At just 14, in the thick of the Wars of the Roses in 1470, she was married off to Edward of Westminster, Prince of Wales, the son of the deposed King Henry VI, and Margaret of Anjou. But the prince was no fairy tale husband. In fact, his historical persona inspired the character of Joffrey in Game of Thrones. So you can imagine what kind of husband Anne had. Luckily for her, the marriage didn't last long. Edward was killed in battle by none other than her own brother-in-law. But freedom from her hated husband left Anne in a difficult position. She was a widow, barely married, a princess without a title, and an heiress without an inheritance. So Anne made a bold move. She took control of her fate and chose as her second husband the very man who likely killed her first, Richard of Gloucester. Yes, if you put the same Richard history remembers as the twisted hunchback who murdered his young nephews and stole the English crown. One way or another, Anne would go on to become Queen of England, though it's doubtful it brought her any real happiness. Her only son and heir to the throne died suddenly, and Anne died a year after his death on the day of a solar eclipse. Another tragically famous Princess of Wales, whose first marriage also lasted just 5 months, but who later became Queen of England and Henry VIII's very first Bluebeard wife, was Catherine of Aragon. In 1501, the young Spanish princess arrived in England and, on November 14th, married Prince Arthur, the Prince of Wales. But just 5 months later, on April 2nd, Arthur died of the sweating sickness, and Catherine was left a 17-year-old widow. The big question became whether their marriage had been consummated. Catherine insisted it hadn't, which would become a central issue years later during her divorce from Arthur's brother, Henry VIII, whom she married in 1509. Their marriage started with genuine love, but was soon overshadowed by the absence of a male heir. Henry began to believe their union was cursed. After all, he had married his brother's widow, and on top of that, he had fallen in love with Anne Boleyn. The divorce proceedings began in 1529. By Henry's order, Catherine was to be referred to only as the Dowager Princess of Wales, based on her marriage to Arthur. But Catherine refused to accept this title. Until her death, she insisted she was still the true Queen of England and Henry's rightful wife. The next Princess of Wales wouldn't appear until 200 years later, in 1714, this time from the newly established Hanoverian dynasty, which had replaced the Stuarts on the English throne. Caroline of Brandenburg-Ansbach had a much more successful marriage than her predecessors. However, the relationship between her husband, George Augustus, and his father, King George I, was so strained that the Prince and Princess of Wales were forbidden from seeing their own children. When her husband became King George II in 1727, Caroline became Queen Consort. She held that title for 10 years before passing away, deeply mourned by her husband, who never remarried. But her daughter-in-law, Augusta of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg, who also held the title, never became queen. Her husband, Frederick, Prince of Wales, died before he could inherit the throne. Still, Augusta played an important role at the court of her son, King George III, the very same mad king and husband of Queen Charlotte. whose skin colour remains the subject of endless debate to this day. It was hate at first sight. That pretty much sums up the marriage of the 6th Princess of Wales, Caroline of Brunswick. Her husband, the future King George IV, was drunk at their wedding and accused her of not being a virgin after their wedding night. She, in turn, accused him of being impotent. Still, 9 months later, their only child was born. Caroline's life as Princess of Wales was filled with humiliation. She lived almost in isolation, forbidden from raising her daughter. And when her husband became king in 1820, he immediately began divorce proceedings. But just like Catherine of Aragon, the people sided with Caroline. Though she was technically the Queen of England, she was famously turned away from Westminster Abbey at her husband's coronation. The doors slammed shut in her face. 3 weeks after that public humiliation, she died, asking for this to be written on her tomb: "The injured Queen of England." The record holder for the longest time spent as Princess of Wales, 38 years, was Alexandra of Denmark, daughter-in-law of Queen Victoria and wife of her wayward son, Bertie. Queen Victoria was desperate to marry off her scandal-prone son, who stayed scandal-prone for life. He even had a special chair made for his affairs, and she wanted a virtuous, healthy bride. Alexandra fit the bill perfectly, and remained loyal to Bertie throughout their marriage. Despite Edward's many affairs, including with Alice Keppel, the great-grandmother of Queen Camilla, their marriage was considered relatively happy. Alexandra became Queen Consort at the age of 57 in 1901, after Queen Victoria's death. Interestingly, just 1 year after Alexandra's death, her great-granddaughter was born, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary of York, the future Queen Elizabeth II. She was given her second name in honour of Alexandra. Just like she chose a wife for her son, Queen Victoria also picked one for her grandson Albert Victor, known in the family as Eddie. She found him rather formless, so she set her hopes on the sensible Princess Mary of Teck, or May, as the family called her, after the month she was born. But just weeks after their engagement, Eddie died of influenza. His younger brother George, Duke of York, suddenly became heir to the throne. During the period of shared mourning, George and Mary grew close, a match Queen Victoria encouraged, as she saw Mary as the perfect future queen. On July 6, 1893, their wedding took place. Just before the ceremony, they ran into each other in the hallway of Buckingham Palace. George smiled at Mary and gave her a deep and courteous bow. It was such a tender gesture that Mary never forgot it, and later said that in that very moment, she knew she'd made the right choice in saying yes. They spent over 40 years together, and unlike his father, George never had any mistresses. Mary of Teck officially became Princess of Wales after Queen Victoria's death in 1901, and in 1910, she became Queen of England. After her husband's death, their eldest son, Edward VIII, was supposed to become King of England, but he abdicated the throne to marry a divorced American woman, Wallis Simpson. Mary, who had devoted her entire life to the crown, couldn't understand or accept his decision. His younger brother, George VI, father of Queen Elizabeth II, took the throne instead. As a result, the next Princess of Wales wouldn't appear until decades later. But when she did, she became the most iconic of them all. 2.5 billion people watched the funeral broadcast of the People's Princess, the Queen of Hearts, Diana, Princess of Wales, who tragically died in a car crash 28 years ago. Diana Spencer became Princess of Wales after marrying Prince Charles in 1981. She was, by the way, the first Englishwoman to marry a Prince of Wales since Anne Neville, and the first princess who had actually worked before her wedding. But we all know how that story ended. Although they divorced in 1996, she continued to hold the title until her tragic and untimely death. And for many of us, that title will always be associated with her. Interestingly, Camilla, who later married Charles, never used the title, even though she had every right to it as the wife of the heir to the throne. But she went out of her way to avoid comparisons with her famous rival. Today, this legendary title is held by Kate Middleton. She received the title in 2022, alongside her husband after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Before that, since her wedding to heir to the throne, Prince William, she was known as the Duchess of Cambridge. Kate is considered one of the most popular members of the royal family, much like her iconic mother-in-law before her. The title of Princess of Wales has been a dream for many over the centuries, the final step before the English crown. But as history shows, only a few Princesses of Wales found true happiness wearing it. Who do you think was the most iconic Princess of Wales? Share in the comments, and see you in the next video.